Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerds. Today, we are discussing Kathleen Kennedy stepping down as president of Lucasfilm and Dave Filoni, alongside Lin-Wen Brennan, taking on the role of co-presidents. Dave Filoni looking after the creative side and Lin-Wen regarding the more executive side. And how do I feel about this? I don't know, because it really depends, right? It really depends on how involved you are as studio head, I suppose. Because like a lot of people blame Kathleen Kennedy for a lot of things that went wrong with Star Wars in the last however many years, and I don't think that was necessarily true. I think was definitely some mistakes made, but are they necessarily Kathleen Kennedy's, or were they from a higher Disney perspective? Were Disney expecting things out too quickly? For example, one of the biggest complaints, I think actually the biggest complaint, is that the sequel trilogy had differentiation between them, that they didn't feel like a continuous theme, a continuous movie, a continuous story by one person, one kind of outlook on where they were heading. And I think that comes down to basically studio pressure. Get a movie out. And so you have people who really didn't have a good through line. And even when JJ came back because, Colin Trevorrow was meant to do, or Trevorrow, however you say it, was meant to do number 9, the last movie, The Rise of Skywalker, that we end up knowing, but it was something else under him. That didn't feel like it really connected with even The Force Awakens, really, because it went in a totally different direction, because they kind of wanted to capstone as best as they could, and kind of knee-jerked to have something that would fit what people wanted. What they thought people wanted, and it didn't necessarily turn out that way. Anyway, so do I think Kathleen Kennedy is to blame for everything that's went wrong with Star Wars in the last however long? No. Do I think under her there's been some very good Star Wars created? Yes. Andor and Rogue One, which ironically are both products that kind of overlap with each other. Mando. Let's not pretend that we didn't like Mandalorian until like the last season. Until that point, people really enjoyed Mandalorian. The first and second season were really, really enjoyable. A lot of people enjoyed them. The third season sort of was an upsetting kind of downturn. I definitely felt that way. But let's not pretend we didn't enjoy the initial entryway into that show. And other things as well. Rebels. We have to remember that Star Wars Rebels came out under Disney rule as well, and the Clone Wars as well. The season 7 of the Clone Wars, which was generally well received, was under Kathleen Kennedy. So really, yes, we've had some projects that weren't great. We've had the 3 sequel trilogy movies. We've had I didn't love, for example, Skeleton Crew. I didn't love Mandalorian season 3, but that, the other side of that is that there's been good stuff as well. And the reason I'm not mentioning Ahsoka is because I feel like Ahsoka has been sort of in this transitionary phase, and I think Ahsoka is sort of linked to what's happening now with Lucasfilm. So we'll talk about that when we talk about Dave Filoni a little bit more. But I don't think Kathleen Kennedy has been this overwhelming force in Star Wars as people make it out for her to be. I think she's largely let people do what they want within the sandbox that she held control over. And I think sometimes she's given them too much reign. I think sometimes she's given them too little. And I think that you can tell which projects that's been the case for. I think I'm a little bit concerned regards where we're going now. Because when Disney took over, and this is something that Kathleen has relatively, again, I'm saying Kathleen, but her team, her rule, I'm using generally how Lucasfilm has run themselves as an example here, but they kind of came out and they said they want to reset the law, and then they want to kind of go forward from there, freeing themselves from that, but that everything from that point would be canon. And so they've done like really big initiatives. They've done like the High Republic initiative, and that's become a really interesting part of the universe for a lot of people. A lot of people really enjoy the High Republic books and the characters that kind of come with that. So there, again, another great initiative that happened, exploring a new era in the Star Wars universe that's separate from all the stuff we've had before, something new and unique. And I think I'm concerned that we're going to go back from that now. And how that's going to look is concerning to me. Basically, we've been told that anything that hasn't already been filmed is sort of on the back burner, or sort of still in development hell, so to speak. So Star Wars Starfighter and the Mole Show, I think that's already pretty much nearly sort of done, or getting close to being done. The other one, what's the other one? Ahsoka season 2. Those are pretty much all still happening. But everything that hasn't really had anything shot yet, the Dawn of the Jedi movie, the new Rey Skywalker movie. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the hunt for Ben Solo being very interesting as a concept for a movie. But that never really got off the ground to begin with. But it looks like maybe isn't. Who knows? That is obviously there as well. I think, for me, my concern is that they're just going to kind of start expunging the universe. So people are thinking, what do you mean? And some people will probably be thankful for this, maybe. I don't know. I don't think any of the movies are going to be retconned, to clarify. I don't think any of the shows likely are going to be retconned, because I think at this point they've kind of prized themselves on the fact that they've made this kind of media empire. You need to kind of go with what you've got. I think what I'm concerned of, and this is something that I think people who invest in the universe outside of the movies and the shows, in the comic books, the games, in the books themselves, anything that's sort of like that, I'm concerned that those are going to be swept aside. Now, I'm going to go in and speak about why I think this with Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni is well known for taking George Lucas's approach to canon. And what I mean by that is, so under Lucasfilm, the canon wasn't like that. The canon was, you sort of had A, B, C, D, like a ranked canon system. If it's in the movies, it's canon. If it's in the shows and it doesn't contradict the movies, it's also canon. This is how they kind of did it. If it's in the books and it doesn't contradict either of the first two, it's canon. If it's in the games and it doesn't contradict any of those three, it's canon. That sort of thing. And then obviously, I knocked my earphone out. If anything below that is sort of just like non-canon stuff, like Lego Star Wars and stuff like that. I think my concern is that Dave Filoni is going to kind of go back to that system. And there's plenty of franchises that sort of use that system, right? There's plenty of franchises that sort of say, like, we're making movies, like there'll be supplementary material that you can buy and read or enjoy, but like we don't really hold ourselves to that. I've said it before, like stuff like I think my prime example is the Batman movie came out a few years back, and there was a book attached to it. I was interested in getting the book, but then I thought, well, the book isn't probably going to be used if they make a second movie. It isn't probably going to be relevant, or it isn't going to really enhance anything for me overall, because it's not going to continue that story in any way. And that's, I think, my concern here, that we might go back to getting books that are sort of they don't really link up, they don't really connect to the story, and they don't really do anything for the story. And like, I can sort of make the distinction if the franchise doesn't make any grand allusions to being connected to canon, everything being connected canon-wise. But I can't make that like that. I can't allow that in my head if they have said that. They did say that. It's a big thing. They've kind of since kind of revoked the Lucasfilm story group or whatever it is. They kind of said that initially. And it feels like Dave Filoni gets a free pass anyways, because there's been a number of occasions where he's basically retconned something that happened. The Ahsoka book, the entirety of it essentially was retconned by the Ahsoka short that they put out in Tales of the Jedi. And Kanan and Jarrus's backstory, which was in a full comic run, was retconned for the Bad Batch, and then Yoda's lightsaber was destroyed after the Battle of Coruscant in a comic, and then obviously showed up in The Mandalorian to kind of do the whole, hey, look, Yoda's lightsaber thing. And it felt kind of gimmicky, especially considering that it was meant to be destroyed. Now, could you argue the lightsaber one is less egregious because you could argue Yoda had a spare lightsaber? Arguably, yes. The other two, less so, because you basically retcon a whole swath of a character's backstory to fit a small moment in a show that you didn't need to do, or that you could have adapted more accurately if you wanted to do it. I don't care about small retcons. Small retcons happen. You know, if you have a big universe and you're doing it for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, which obviously Star Wars is at that point, and even the new canon is now 10 years, 11 years old. Yeah, so like I get it. There's gonna be mistakes, but there's mistakes and there's flagrantly going in the face of something else. And I think Dave Filoni has this idea that if he hasn't created it and it's about his characters, he'll just overwrite it. And that really frustrates me, because now we've got someone who is going to basically have taken all the investment that I and others have put in through the books and the comics and the extra media, essentially, and potentially wipe it. Potentially. Because we don't know how he's gonna deal with that now, right? And I've kind of done the negative part now. And I want to say I think Dave Filoni has made great Star Wars. Rebels is some of my favorite Star Wars ever. Some of my favorite characters are in Rebels. Obviously the Clone Wars is what kept Star Wars going for a lot of years. I can't I won't badmouth Dave for that. Bad Batch, technically sound. Didn't love the story at some points, but technically sound. You know, Ahsoka, and I despite what I've said about all this, the Ahsoka show, I actually really enjoyed. I really enjoyed it, and I know a lot of people use Ahsoka the show as a stamp of why Dave Filoni's not good for this role. I actually disagree. I actually really enjoyed Ahsoka, and I'm excited for season 2. I think what they did with that show was a little bit different, but it allowed you to kind of experience the characters that you've been so interested in for so long in the different medium. And I think that was really brave of Lucasfilm to do that, like putting a character that's an alien, because they usually do human characters as the main character, at the forefront. And I think it worked. I think I enjoyed it. And I think when Dave Filoni is within his universe, he's very good. Do you know what I mean? Like when he's doing what he does it well. It's when he starts stepping on other people's toes that I don't like it. I've never had an issue with anything that Dave Filoni has actually made. And I know a lot of people have an issue of him, like he so loves his characters that he's made that he brings them back and like messes with them a little bit, like bringing a Sarge Ventress back. I know he didn't make her, but bringing her back and kind of, again, because even though it was sort of, there was an explanation. There's going to be an explanation as to what I think they either explained it in an article or they said they were going to explain it more fully in something at some point. But I know that there was an explanation as to how she resurrected, but she died in a book, and then the book has now not been made not retcon, because they did kind of go with that concept still within the show, but the book became kind of moot because the whole point of that book is to see Asajj go through what she did and then see what happened. But like, yeah, I think that book still is very worth a read, but it's sort of frustrating that now he's kind of like wanted Asajj Ventress back to do stuff with her, and I actually really love Asajj Ventress, so I'm not as mad about that one. But he did it in such a way that it kind of undermined another piece of, if you want to call it extra canon or whatever, but it's canon. It's as canon as the rest, and it really frustrates me. And I think people don't care about it because they don't read the books or they don't watch the shows as much, or whatever reasons. There's a million different reasons as to why someone doesn't care about extra canon, but that doesn't mean that it's really okay. I think if you're getting on a wide scale someone to get into your universe because all the material's canon, and then like 10 years down the line you sort of tell them, all those books you guys bought and didn't, and like, you know, like at least in the old universe, you always knew that canon could be retconned. And I think that's what I'm trying to get across with like any other franchise. Any other franchise sort of doesn't make that proclamation. So if you read a book and they go, oh, actually, we're going to do something about that, so we're going to make that bit non-canon, you kind of can't be annoyed because they've never promised that to you. But when you're promised that everything's going to be canon and then it's not, it's a little frustrating. And I think maybe I get on this soapbox very often, but it's one that I really care about, because if I've spent so much of my time investing in your universe because you told me to, because you say it's going to matter, then I want it to continue to matter. And I understand eventually, like if Star Wars, for example, was to totally reboot next month or like a year's time, that's different again, because in my head, that universe mattered and those stories mattered to that universe. But if you're making a book and you say it's canon and then it's not canon, but the universe is still the same universe, that annoys me. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. I think I'm trying to make it clear. I think I'm, yeah, I don't know. But like, it depends on how things go. I don't want to sit here and say Dave Filoni is bad for Star Wars, because I don't think he is. I don't think he's on his own, you know, and no one at the top is going to work on their own. And even still, even let's say Kathleen Kennedy was bad. Even if she was a bad president for Lucasfilm, we've still got good stuff under her. So that's not to say it'll be any different for Dave Filoni. You know, I think you trade one president for another, and the difference doesn't seem that much in my head. You know, there's some downfalls to one, there's some downfalls to the other, and generally we'll see how it goes. You know, despite everything I've said, he was trained by George Lucas. He was close to George Lucas. He's sort of no different to Kathleen Kennedy in that regard. She was very close with George. Dave is obviously very close with George. It makes sense to have someone who was trained by him taking on the franchise next. I just want him to be a little bit more conscious of the canon that he's working with, because the stories outside of his movies and his TV shows are still good, and they deserve to be left whole where possible. I understand sometimes, again, there's going to be small retcons. You know, for example, Tony Gilroy did it in Andor. And I actually didn't like it, because I think there's a way you could have easily made that an episode in the show, or you could have like alluded to that and then moved on. But they basically retconned how K2SO and Cassian met. And now that comic isn't like the be-all, end-all comic. It's not like something revolutionary. That's not the point. If it's canon, we should be going with it. So that was a little bit frustrating to me as well. So there's things where like really they're undermining their own point at this point, and I'm really hoping that doesn't continue to be the case, because I really don't want to end up at a point where Star Wars as extra media just becomes irrelevant to me and becomes something I don't bother with anymore, because I've invested a lot of hours in a lot of Star Wars books. You can't see them here, but they're over there. There's a lot of them, and I want them to matter. Again, at least until they say like they're not doing it, you know, or they're rebooting, or they're changing things, or, you know, if they came out and said that, I think I'd almost have a different opinion then as well. But just kind of purposefully poking holes in your own tapestry, so to speak, is kind of blatant and ignorant, in my opinion, regardless of how great the project is, because it undermines your product in my head, because you're just going, yep, buy this book, it's going to matter, and then it doesn't. I feel like I'm saying the same thing again and again. Yeah, I don't know. I think was Star Wars so bad under Kathleen Kennedy? Parts, yes. Was Star Wars bad under George Lucas at times? Yes. Will it be bad under Dave Filoni at times? Probably. Also, yes. Because guess what? Even the MCU, one of the most successful franchises in the world, has had bad movies, and still continues to have bad movies. Star Wars is no different. Other franchises are no different. Everyone goes, "Oh, I didn't like that one," of like Alien, Predator, you know, other things. It swings and roundabouts. There's always going to be good and bad in every franchise. Gaming wise, it's exactly the same as well. You know, there's games where it's like, I really loved one, didn't enjoy two as much, or, you know, it happens. Generally, sequels are worse. I don't know. I think it's a wait and see situation. I'm just very concerned about the canon side of things, and we'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll have an announcement about it. Who knows? But yeah, thank you guys for watching and listening as always. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to me rant about canon in Star Wars for a whole 20 minutes. Yeah, that's the end of this episode. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye, guys.